We are proud to be sponsored by Kiteworks, a secure content platform for CMMC compliance. Kiteworks is FedRAMP Moderate authorized and helps accelerate your path to CMMC 2.0 compliance. Did you know Kiteworks puts defense contractors on the fastest path to meeting CMMC 2.0 requirements, leveraging the same zero trust framework guidance used for federal requirements? Kiteworks supports nearly 90% of the security requirements for CMMC 2.0 Level 3. This can drastically reduce the effort and costs associated with obtaining CMMC 2.0 authorization. What's really cool to us is Kiteworks has an ongoing bounty program and regular penetration testing to minimize vulnerabilities along with one-click appliance updates. Kiteworks provides unparalleled ease of use with its intuitive web UI, mobile apps, and even Outlook integration. This user-friendly experience avoids productivity disruptions during your CMMC 2.0 implementation. Accelerate your CMMC 2.0 compliance and address federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal, secure file sharing platform made for defense contractors. Visit kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to get started today.
Exactly. An industrial organizational psychology. Another long one.
Welcome, everybody, to Cybercrime Junkies. I'm your host, David Morrow, and we're going to try this intro again. I am very excited about having our guest in. We've been wanting her to be a guest on the show for a long time. Shawnee Delaney joins us. She is the CEO of Viance Group, keynote speaker, author, expert on cybersecurity, insider threat, and counterintelligence. She was an IT specialist in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, operations officer with the U.S. Department of Defense, holds a master's degree in cybersecurity and another master's degree in international policy studies with a specialization in counterterrorism and counterproliferation, which I don't know how you got that all on the diploma, and is seeking a third master's degree because 2 clearly is not enough in industrial organizational psychology. From that one is from George Mason, I believe.
Correct. Yeah.
So after spending nearly a decade with the department's with the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, as a decorated clandestine services officer, and yes, it is as cool as it sounds. She was a senior manager at Uber, running their global insider threat program. And today, as mentioned, she serves as CEO of Viance, specializing in insider threat protection for organizations across the globe. Shawnee, welcome to the studio.
Thank you. I'm just trying to give you a little verbal gymnastics just to kick it off and make you say really long words.
Salad, man. That was a lot.
I'm sorry.
So, no, that's great. That's fantastic. So I've got to start from the beginning, and that is why? Why? I first want to go down the why multiple masters, but why insider threat? Why? What happened to you when you were a kid caused you to want to do this? You grew up with very strong women in your family, as I understand.
Very.
So walk us through that. Tell us kind of what spurned you into this passion of insider threat.
Yeah, I look back and I ask why all the time too. So my mother was a sheriff's deputy in California. Neat. And her mother, my grandmother, if you can see right here, this gold medal, this giant gold medal, that's her congressional gold medal. She was a WASP, a woman Air Force service pilot in World War II. And I grew up thinking that not only did she single-handedly win the war,
that
but
she was Batman.
Yeah. Really. And growing up, my parents always taught me, you can do anything you want if you work hard, period.
Right.
That's how I was raised. And so when I was really young, the Marine Corps barracks were bombed in Beirut, Lebanon. I'm sure a lot of people remember that. There was something about that event, about the newscast that I saw with my father when it happened that just really sunk in. I have really vivid memories. I can remember Dan Rather's tone on the television. I remember my dad reacting to the story, and there was just something that triggered me. And as I grew up, I don't remember the age I was when I found out what espionage was, but I was very young. And it was like angels started singing from above when I learned what it was. And I felt like that's my calling. That is what I was meant to do. I'm a very mission oriented person. And it all just kind of fell into place. Well, I'm not going to say it fell into place. I doggedly pursued everything that I wanted to do, but that's kind of the path that I laid out for myself.
That's amazing. So your work in the with the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. Some listeners may not know what the DIA does. Can you walk us through that? Just high level.
People know the CIA. Everyone knows the CIA. The DIA has a similar mission, but we are there to protect the warfighter. So we have clandestine operatives, just like CIA. In fact, we're all trained together down at the farm. DIA and CIA instructors together.
Is this like a magical farm that nobody knows where it is? It's like,
well, if anyone's seen any TV or any movies, they know what the farm is. It's the famous spy school, if you will. But yeah, it was fun. I'm the only nerd probably on the planet that had a great time going to the farm. Everyone else was stressed out. I thought it was great, probably because I had always wanted to do it.
Right.
And I was so excited to be there. But yeah, so the DIA,
it's like Hollywood coming to life too. It's like all those spy movies. You're like, this is actually where you learn how to really do it.
Yeah. Yeah. In a way. Now I'll tell you that the job is not like Hollywood at all, but
well, no, it's really data points, right? Like it's a lot of it is social engineering or finding your way into certain data points. And then you transfer that data point somewhere else and someone else is kind of connecting the dots.
Right.
Is that is that kind of it?
Yeah. So when you look at intelligence gathering on the human side, you have to have targets, right? You have to have sources, and those sources, hopefully, if they're good, you recruit them and they become a recruited asset, and they're providing intelligence information. I think what people don't realize is that when people, before they're even officially recruited and know what they're doing, they're still providing intelligence. Right? That's how we're walking them down that human intelligence recruitment cycle pathway. But when we are gathering intelligence and we're trying to find answers to certain requirements that the government pushes down, we're doing our due diligence. There are targeting officers. I had to myself develop targeting packages. So let's say you need an answer to some niche question requirement. We trolled social media. When social media came out, it was like, again, heavens open and angels sing.
Oh, yeah.
Because so much information is out there. People post so much information about their life. And so to find, just like a social engineer, to find out if someone is disgruntled or they want another job or, they're sad because a family member is sick or what have you, you can really leverage those motivations and vulnerabilities and craft a really good pitch or a bump, which is like a chance encounter. So yeah, that's pretty much how we'd start it. A lot of cold calls, stuff like that.
It sounds like a phenomenal sales training.
It is.
It is like, screw the challenger sale methodology. Like that is a really good, let's all go to the farm.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
like bring everybody down there.
David, you're taught to build empathy and build rapport and elicit information. Elicitation is one of the greatest gifts to sales members that I can possibly think of.
Oh, yeah.
So all of those techniques really.
Now you mentioned empathy. Like when you mentioned empathy, you mean it in the context of like what Chris Voss talks about of tactical empathy, meaning helping them feel understood so that they provide more information.
To a degree.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I would argue instead of tactical empathy, you need genuine empathy. Because these people are putting their lives and their families' lives on the line to give you intelligence, period.
Right.
And so if you don't have something that's genuine, if you don't actually truly care about them and their loved ones, they're going to see right through you.
Of course. So there has to be authentic element there. Right. Yes. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. So walk us through some of the, like, I know a lot of what you did was confidential and you can't, I'm aware of your public speaking and some of the content that you've shared, but what, is there any story that happened to you when you were serving in the role for the government that you found in private industry, business owners really are finding value in? Right. And I imagine it has to do with insider threat coupled with that compared to insider risk. And we're going to get into that in just a second.
Yeah.
But is there anything where you learned something about how people react or any stories that you could share?
Well, how much time do you have? I could
we've
literally
got
talk
time.
for a month.
We've got time.
I have more stories than anyone you've ever met.
Yes.
You know,
and you spin everything into
Yes.
the context. Everybody works within a framework of what they like.
Yes.
Mine is always like, I'll look at a sporting event and be like, well, the cybersecurity implications are this, right? And you, like, something happens in the news and you're like, well, here's the insider threat view of this. Because that's what you're always posting on. It's like you see it through that framework.
I see everything through that lens. I feel like I kind of only half jokingly say I could take anything and spin it into insider threat.
Right.
I mean, what people don't realize about that, and when we're talking about stories, is with insider threat, the vast majority is unintentional or negligent. Like, they didn't mean to make the mistake. And so things like a good one is there was a North American casino. It's unnamed. Nobody knows who it is.
Of course.
That was hijacked. Basically, all of their high roller database got hacked and sucked up into the cloud and gone. And the vector that those attackers used was a smart thermometer.
I can't believe you're bringing this up. This is what we talk about. That's where I thought you were going. I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We talk about that incident all the time in our security awareness trainings when we talk about IoT and we talk about Internet of Things.
Wearables.
Because people aren't aware. And I'm like, so this guy walks into a casino. Let me tell you what happens, right? All of that data from all their whales, all of those big betting, all like their credit, all of that stuff was up there, right?
Yes. Yes.
All from a smart thermometer in an exotic fish tank.
But people don't see the insider threat angle.
Right.
Which is someone misconfigured that.
Right.
It was unintentional.
Right. That's exactly right. They left it on the admin, the password of admin or something, whatever really happened, but it was not encrypted properly.
Right. Right. So in telling stories like that, that's when people think that could happen to us.
Right.
You know, people have this inherent natural trait to be risk averse, not just risk averse, but they think it can't happen to them. Be it individuals, no one's going to target me. No one's going to try to recruit me. Why would a spy ever want to target me?
Right. Or geolocation. I'm an hour and a half outside of Wichita, Kansas. I'm not a threat. I'm like, you're not a target so long as you don't get online. Exactly. Just don't get online, and then you're truly an hour from Wichita. But as soon as you get online, you're in everybody's world.
Yeah. But so things like that. I had a recruited asset in a foreign country who had access to a certain network that the intelligence community needed, for example. And we just outfitted her with a USB, just a thumb drive, very, very special thumb drive. But all they had to do was plug it in.
Right. Had key loggers or whatever, allegedly.
Right. Just plug it in and go about your daily business. Unplug it in a couple minutes. And the intelligence community owns that network for perpetuity. Right.
Wow.
So when I tell stories like that, that's when I kind of expand on conferences and travel and USB giveaways and children who plug things in and they don't know. So we can really expand people's worlds just by these little stories and these little, nuggets of information, real world.
Well, and people don't think that corporate espionage is really a thing. And I'm like, I have hundreds of examples. Like there's all these big pharma companies and even smaller mom and pop kind of like pharma testing companies and things. Yes. And when one person leaves, they give them gifts. They're like, here's a gift, do this, whatever. And some of it's like a brand new thumb drive or whatever. Mm-hmm. They go and they stick it in, and all of a sudden, like, they're getting all the like intellectual property from their competitor. And the person didn't even know about it.
Yeah. Right? Well, I mean, I'm sure you heard in the news, 6 months, a year ago, there were a bunch of military members who were getting random packages in the mail with like smartwatches and smart devices. Yes, right. And the smart ones obviously didn't turn them on or plug them in and reported it. And they noticed this pattern of behavior. So there are threat actors.
Because the smartwatch gives off your geolocation. Right. And your health information,
your network, you connect to your Wi-Fi,
all of that. And now whoever sent that to you has all that.
Pattern of life. When Fitbit, I think it was Fitbit, came out, I was in a war zone and military members started wearing it and they were running around the perimeter of the base for PT.
Right.
And it wasn't until shortly after that everyone realized that there were threat actors that were hacking into those and they could then see where's the dining facility, where's the billeting, where's the, you know, just from that geolocation like you were talking about.
Oh, think of that. That's
unintentional insider threat.
Yeah. So getting back to the guy that walks into a casino, walk us through what happens there. So he walks in, he sees, or he or she, but it was a he, sees the thermometer for the exotic fish tank. And then what happens next?
So basically they exploited that smart thermometer being connected to the network and they went in through the smart thermometer's connection to the network to get into that database, exfiltrate that data, and take it out. Pretty simple.
So many issues there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many, like, why, first of all, why is the thermometer itself not encrypted
Protected.
better? Right. But secondly, why is that connected to the same network or database that has all of the other confidential information? That's a whole other issue, right?
That's a
whole like zero trust kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and zero trust, this was in 2018, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was like 2017, 2018 or 2019. It was like 5 years ago or so.
Zero trust wasn't a thing back then.
Correct.
So, you know, okay on them that they didn't know that.
Yeah.
But what a tough lesson to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can't believe you brought that up. I love when I use stories and then like I'm there and somebody like tells the story. I'm like, I know that story.
It's validating.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, I see that all the people that attended our security awareness or our public speech or whatever. I'm like, I was telling good stories. See, I'm paying for this one.
I know what I'm talking about.
Like, yeah, right. That's good. So that's good. So let's define some terms. So you used a term that was interesting, and that was the recruited asset. Like I think I know what that means, but maybe I don't. So can you explain that to the listeners?
Yeah. So let me start. I'll explain first the human intelligence recruitment cycle.
Yeah, please.
I like to use the analogy of dating because it's the closest thing I can think of.
Yeah.
So let's say you're starting, let's say you're young and you're starting to date, maybe old and you're starting to date, and you're using a dating app or you're in a bar. The first thing you're doing is you're looking for your next partner, right? That's what we're doing. We're spotting. So that first thing is spotting. We are trying to find what's your access, what are your motivations, what are your vulnerability, what's your suitability, you know, all these different things we're assessing. We're assessing
right.
you. So just like dating, okay, David, I found you. I see your placement and I see your access. I think you're going to be reasonably suitable. You seem nice. You're not wearing a tinfoil hat. All right.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Let's move into assessment. That's the next phase.
You're like, what's their FICO score?
Exactly.
You're like, is this person a deadbeat? Are they going to pay their bills? I kind of want to know that.
Right.
Right.
Is David going to suddenly think he is James Bond and go off and go rogue? That's not what we want, right?
Right. Well, especially in terms of intelligence, right?
Yes.
You don't want...
We need control.
You need control. Absolutely.
Yeah. So after the assessment, and let me caveat that by saying throughout this whole cycle, we are still assessing and reassessing motivations, vulnerability, suitability, et cetera.
Right.
So then we move into development. Now, personally, development is my favorite part of the phase. I think a lot of people would tell you it's recruitment because you're getting that next notch on your belt, so to speak. But I loved development because you got to really spend time, much like a relationship. When you're in a monogamous relationship, it's just you two, and I want to know your hopes and your fears and your dreams. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to meet your family. I want to know if you sleep at night with a tinfoil hat. I want to know if you are a big
behind
fan
closed
of James
doors.
Bond. Right. So that development phase can be very, very long. A dear friend of mine, who you probably know, James Lawler, he was an operations officer with the CIA, and he said it took him 11 years to recruit just one asset. So this can be this can be a really long process.
11 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If you're doing it right, you do what it takes. You're building that trust. You're building that rapport with someone. So again, just like dating, again, it could be long, could be short, but then let's say you want to move on to that next phase, which is popping the question. It's the same thing with recruitment. So we're going to move into recruitment. So they're providing non-public information. They're suitable, right? They're not going to go off the reservation. We think they're submitting
now, they
to
are
control.
a target because they have access to something or some system or someone or something.
Person. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Got
it.
And
so then we recruit. And just like popping the question, when you propose marriage, you hope, or you should know the answer is going to be yes before you ask. Otherwise, it's going to be a big disappointment. It's
they teach you that in law school. Like, don't ever ask questions if you don't know, if you don't have a good hunch about what the answer is going to be.
Don't go there. But when we recruit, we're dropping our cover, right? Whatever cover I had for that operation, for that developmental source, I am now saying, hey, I'm actually Defense Intelligence Agency. I want you to work with me and provide sensitive and secret information. That's a big deal. So when we recruit someone and then they say, yes, it's good to go, it's kind of like being married. So in a marriage, you might give like a honey-do list, right?
Right.
Now we're giving that recruited asset, a list of taskings. Bring me this information, bring me that information. And we're teaching tradecraft and we're teaching them how to do that
safe. Because you've established trust.
Exactly.
And friendship. And then you in turn will provide them with things, whatever their needs are. Right?
Exactly. And so we will handle them as the next phase. And then we will terminate. And termination is not violent, but maybe they don't want to do it anymore. Maybe they lost their access. Maybe they started to go a little wonky. That's when we sever the relationship.
Right. Just like just like a divorce or a breakup or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Firm, fair, final.
Yeah. Interesting. So interesting. So what's the difference between insider threat and insider risk?
Good question. So look at insider risk as the risk you have by employing humans. Full stop. Okay. So humans make mistakes. Humans take shortcuts. Humans have alternating motivations. Humans are fallible. Mm-hmm. So that's your human risk. We all have it. Insider threat. So insider risk is left of boom, if you would, before the bad things happen. Insider threat is after the bad thing has happened. And that can be malicious. That can be unintentional or negligent, like I talked about. And that can be compromise. Someone who basically, like a threat actor, has taken advantage of that unintentional or that negligent person to compromise those credentials, for example.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Ever see a data breach in the news and think, what does this mean for me? Or what should my organization do because of that breach? Well, Cybercrime Junkies, we've got exciting news. We all know stories help spread security awareness. So July 1st, we launched season 5 of our podcast with a fresh, exciting twist. Cyber Flashpoints. These will be your go-to source for short segments. You'll see all the ways that storytelling helps you understand cybersecurity and how a podcast can even help keep businesses safe online. Come join us for season 5 and our new Cyber Flashpoint. Hey, before you go, did you know that over 80% of our YouTube viewers don't subscribe to our channel? What is the deal with that? It's free. We don't sell your data, contact you, or spam you. So do us a very important favor. This really matters to us because it's all about that algorithm. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast, right there on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and let's make season 5 the best ever. Absolutely. And they can both be massively devastating.
Yes. Typically the compromised category costs organizations 3 times more per incident than that of a negligent insider. And you can imagine why, if someone's getting into a network through it versus someone printing from home or emailing themselves something or things like that. So that category of compromised insider is really, really devastating. But when you get up to malicious, and that's the smallest category statistically, when you get into that malicious category, fraud, sabotage, espionage, theft of intellectual property, workplace violence, etc., those two, depending on what it is, can be incredibly devastating. Sabotage in particular, when you have someone who has been
like a disgruntled employee
Yes.
or something like that.
Yep.
That could be really devastating.
Really bad, especially if whatever they're doing, they've got that natural access to do it. It's going to take a long time for organizations using their tools to detect, let's say they planted a logic bomb or stole admin credentials or things like that. It can be really hard to detect until it's too late.
Well, yeah, and a lot of organizations, in my experience anyway, don't do a phenomenal job. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, they really don't do a phenomenal job in offboarding correctly. There are still a lot of former employees that have their emails are still active, like, for just doing whatever services we might be proposing or engaging with a client. We will, find lists and lists of like hundreds of employees that no longer work here. I'm like, you do realize that their credentials are still live, right? Like, that's really, so that's massive insider risk, essentially.
It is. And I think what companies don't realize, or organizations, not just companies, they don't realize that there are a lot of basically free or cheap things that they can do to mitigate their human risk really substantially when it comes to employment lifecycle management. And offboarding is that tail end of that cycle, if you will.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because half the time it's because it fell on somebody's desk to do, and that's a massive project. Yes. And meanwhile, we have them doing 50 other things.
Yes, exactly. Which that right there is your insider threat, because they're stressed, they're distracted, they've got all these competing priorities. And so things are going to slip through the cracks.
And there's nobody above really watching. This is a threat. This is an insider threat.
Right.
It's not like a network you can monitor and see that necessarily.
Right. I mean, there are amazing tools out there. Mm-hmm. But those are to supplement having a legitimate program, making sure your HR, your hiring managers, your C-suite, making sure everyone has bought in, and then making sure that your whole enterprise speaks the same language. Everyone needs to know how they could leave you vulnerable, how those shortcuts, when they're skipping I know the policy, but I don't want to, it's just me.
Yeah, that's exactly
that.
Right.
Yeah. All of those things kind of holistically make you have a much stronger program and mitigate your human risk quite substantially.
Yeah. Another example you mentioned briefly, you kind of gleaned over it, and that is like people just emailing themselves stuff. Happens all the time. I want to make sure I do this. Oh, this is important, but I want to see it later. Or I found this somewhere and I want to read this later. And they do that. And there's so much data in people's inboxes or their sent folder, right? Like they've sent out these documents or they've sent it internally to somebody. There's so much confidential data that a compromise of one email account has much more than being able to escalate privileges and getting beyond that email account. There's so much data in just any employee's email box, right?
People are hoarders. People are digital hoarders.
Especially, that's a great phrase. They are digital hoarders because you just never know. Like, well, this is interesting. I want to read about this later. Or I don't know if I'm going to be asked about this in some meeting later, so let me hold on to it. Rather than put it in a encrypted folder or on an external drive or something that's separated, air gapped, it is right there, right in your inbox.
Right. Yes, 100%.
That's a big deal.
I mean, look, there's all kinds of analogies we could use for that, for the hoarding thing, but people just need to recognize that those little cyber hygiene best practices, those little steps, like what you were just talking about, or I don't know, there are just so many little things that if you add up, adds to more security. It's like a security onion, if you will, right? Each layer, it's little, it's thin, but each one adds to protection. And so when you have so many, ultimately that bad actor, whoever's targeting you, they're going to go on to the next organization if you've got more layers, so to speak.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I mean, we kind of explain that to people in that you don't need, like, if they focus on you and stay on you, they're going to get in. Like someone's going to get in, even if it comes like me stopping by with a box of donuts. You're going to let me in the building eventually. I'm getting in.
Right.
But the issue is more, you want to make it such a hassle and so much time. It's like good passwords, right? If you make it hard enough where the software just keeps spooling, they're going to move on because there's still other 15 other organizations that are still using password for their password.
And like Windows 2. You know?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
Unbelievable. So what are some of the motivations or triggers that you see that create insider threat? Like for me, and I could be wrong, but I've always thought of insider threat programs at an organization. What they're looking for are certain life triggers. Like if you know like when you hear these stories about an admin at a local government, right? All of a sudden, pilfers off $40 million bucks. Right. And her salary was $60,000 a year, but she just bought a mansion. And you're like, well, okay, but it's usually like there's certain signs that you can see, or something is taken because somebody's family member has cancer and the deductible's too high. And it's like that life trigger that they're like, they feel no other, like they need that money. Yeah. And it's those things. So how do organizations identify them? What do they do?
Yeah. So good question. There's something called the critical pathway that doctors Eric Shaw and Laura Seller came up with. And what they say, and I totally subscribe to this, I've seen it, it's textbook like every case, is we have personal predispositions. We all have personal predispositions. You do, I do, everyone listening does. Some of those predispositions just makes people a higher risk to commit a malicious act. Narcissism, for example. If anyone knows a narcissist, you're like nodding right now, like, yep. I see it. Yep.
If anybody's been called a narcissist. Right? Yes. Okay.
So let's say you've got someone who's a narcissist, maybe they have a problem with authority. Right. That does not make them an insider threat.
Right.
However, you add in what you're talking about. You're adding stressors. I like to say there's personal stressors, maybe relationship issues, financial issues. There's professional stressors. Maybe you don't feel valued at work. Maybe you didn't get a promotion you expected. And then there's external stressors that I think when COVID started, I really started talking about external stressors because COVID was an external stressor that no one could control. It affected all of our lives in pretty much every capacity. And it really impacted people substantially. That's why fraud and theft of IP skyrocketed during COVID.
Absolutely.
So you've got those stressors, you compound that with those personal predispositions, and that's when someone's pattern of behavior starts to change. So organizations need to... So
it's an anomaly. It's almost like how SOC services or SIM or MDR can detect an anomaly in a network, right? Something funky, like just something odd outside of the standard operating business practice.
Right.
The human behavior has those same anomalies.
Yes, it does. But if your employees don't know what that means, if they don't know what to look for, if they don't know what to do if they see something abnormal, you're screwed.
Right.
Period. You could have all the tools in the world. That's great. But having people know that it's safe to report a concern, someone's acting weird. Well, they just had a baby. That's writing it off. You're not doing a risk assessment. You're not digging in. Well, maybe that person has financial issues. Maybe they're disgruntled. Maybe there's a whole list of other issues. So if employees report concerns, hey, Mary's acting weird. I don't know what's wrong. Or suddenly there's affluence that never happened. If the company will intervene, if they'll offer EAP support, if they'll assess, do a risk assessment, that's when you can pretty much mitigate that risk. That's your opportunity. But if they don't do that, if no one reports it, or the company is like, it's fine, sleep deprived.
That's when that person say something.
Yeah, that's when that person's allowed to continue walking down that critical pathway until there's that trigger and they commit a malicious act.
Then how do employers handle confronting that person?
It depends
because
on the
sometimes it's negligence, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's more just, are you okay? What's going on? We notice this is happening. If we could solve it, wouldn't you benefit? Like there's still positive productive ways of
100%.
of doing
100%.
that. Because then you might be able to tell whether it's really intentional or not.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to my empathy. Empathy is great for espionage, but it's also great for business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So if you not confront, but if you talk to that person with empathy, genuine empathy, we are here to help you. We want you to keep your job because it's going to cost more, right? If you're off-board and we have to hire someone, everything, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Right.
But the goal of everyone is to keep you in place and make sure you're happy and healthy. What can we do to help you? Here are these services. Take some time off. Maybe, in some extreme cases I've seen, they've brought in operational psychologists to actually evaluate that person and make sure they're fit for duty. So there are a lot of different things organizations can do, but ignoring it is just going to make your problem worse in the long run.
Absolutely. So the master's degree in industrial organizational psychology, how does that fit into insider threat and insider threat protection?
I get a lot of questions about that, actually. I joke I'm just trying to add something really long again.
Yeah, just another thing that they have to have 2 pieces of paper, so your diploma is really big.
Right. So industrial organizational psychology really focuses on the psychology, the culture of working environments, of employers and things like that, of workplaces.
So that's directly related.
So I look at it like this. I used to recruit the vulnerable insider. So I was the malicious actor, number one. Number two, working in these companies, standing up their programs, doing the investigations. I understand it from that angle as well. The mitigation, the cybersecurity angle, right? The third angle for me is for the customer, for the companies, for those organizations.
Right.
How can I help them affect change, positive change, and shifting their culture? Because a lot of times when I'm doing human risk assessments, a lot of times it really boils down to culture and cultural problems and morale problems. So that's where the IO psych comes in.
Got it. Makes perfect sense.
Plus, who needs sleep, David? I mean, really?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So when a human risk assessment for an organization, what all does that entail?
So what we do is we do a really deep dive into all their policies, procedures, playbooks, processes, number one. We do one-on-one interviews, confidential interviews with all the stakeholders and then some, random employees from the very, very top all the way to the very, very bottom. And we're looking at culture, like I said, culture, morale, organizational problems, roadblocks, and then micro stressors. They've done studies, micro stressors, things that like just annoy you every day at work. This process is broken and every day it causes me a headache. Those micro stressors snowball faster than anything else and can cause disgruntlement faster than anything else.
Right.
So we're
and productivity can improve if you fix those, right?
Exactly. Right. And with productivity, morale. Right.
Absolutely.
So we do a deep dive in that and we tell organizations what they're doing well, where they can improve, and then basically give them a roadmap for how they can move forward and build out a more solid program.
Excellent. That's so interesting. So where's the line between cybersecurity, right, and insider threat? Because you're a master at like looking at a cybersecurity incident and like, well, this is an insider threat because of this, right? I mean, when we think of that, the guy that walks into the casino, right? Most people would look at it, well, that's a cybersecurity incident, right? They didn't encrypt the thermometer correct. They didn't configure or segment air gap the different networks, and they're looking at it from a technical perspective. Right. But it really is an insider threat, right? Like they didn't do that. So where's the line there?
They overlap. It's a Venn diagram.
It is a Venn diagram.
Right. So yes, there are cyber vectors. There are cyber vulnerabilities, but it wasn't a computer setting everything up. It was a person or a team.
Right. Exactly.
It is, as Don Freese says, it is the skin behind the keyboard. Right. And one problem I see pretty rampantly is that a lot of CISOs think it is that cyber problem. It's all cyber, but they're
it's
totally
all in
discounting
the binary
people.
Zero and ones that can solve everything. And I'm like, it's not going to solve everything.
It is not going to solve everything. You have to look at the humans.
Well, and look at like social engineering. Like social engineering is still involved, either directly or proximately to like over 80 some percent, depending on which stat you pull, right, of all the data breaches. I'm like, well, that's not code, right? That's still negligence or intentional, right, acts of, taking advantage of negligence, right, which bring about the launching of code.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So I'm still on track here.
No, you're on track. Everyone just needs to imagine that Venn diagram, but they're not apart with a little bit. It is very, very overlapped.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So employee lifecycle management, what does that mean? And is that something that needs to be discussed in the, the SMB space, the initiatives, it needs to be on people's whiteboards. Like, how are we managing employee lifecycle?
It does. And I think when I think about it, managing the employee lifecycle is probably one of the easiest, quickest things you can do and cheapest things you can do to mitigate your
it's a policy, right? Like it's creation of a policy.
It's not even just a policy. It's like a set. Look at it as a series of touch points throughout someone's career. If we have a career trajectory, right, left to right, and on the left, we've got recruitment. So they're advertising for a position. Step one.
Yep.
Advertise that honestly is my first bit of advice. If someone can't have a cell phone at work, put it in the job description.
Right.
Because if you hire that person and then they find out they can't have their phone, you suddenly have a disgruntled employee and everything else is going to upset them and it's going to snowball. So that's a good example.
Right. Or they're going to violate policy.
Right. You're going to hide it, sneak it in.
Yeah.
So advertise honestly. When you're doing recruitment and interviewing candidates, hiring managers and HR business partners need to recognize that someone could be phenomenal in an interview. Their resume could be better than anyone they've ever seen, and they want to offer them a job. But before they do that, they need to have a series of questions. Maybe one person is designated culture person. Maybe everyone sprinkles it throughout the interviews, but they need to see if that person is a good cultural fit for that company. Because if they are not, you're going to have a Joshua Schulte case, that CIA software engineer who leaked a bunch of stuff to WikiLeaks on really sensitive programs of the CIA because he wasn't a good culture fit in his little office.
Really?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was WikiLeaks. It's the biggest leak in history is because this guy worked in a small office and he didn't get along with people. They had Nerf guns. It was kind of a frat house atmosphere. Mm-hmm. They nicknamed him Nuclear Option because they thought he overreacted to everything, but it was that he wasn't a good culture fit. And they could have weeded that problem out in the first steps and not offered him that assignment. So that's again, free. It's free. Right. It's easy. Just do it right. And then throughout the rest of someone's life cycle, you've got development, right? And retention, making sure, if someone's struggling at home, being a single parent, for example, or offer those interventions, offer that support, because if you don't, and you force them into the office or what have you, they're going to get disgruntled, and that disgruntlement is key. And then that snowballs into that trigger. And then like we talked about earlier, ending it with offboarding. If you don't do your termination, voluntary or involuntary, if you don't do it thoughtfully, and if you're not every HRPP, every manager, anyone offboarding people, did you ever email yourself company information? Have you ever saved company information onto a hard drive? Those belong to us. We need those back.
Right.
Nobody has ever asked me that anywhere I've ever been.
Never.
Right.
Never once.
But how many people have hard drives or have stuff in their email?
Or did you save it to a Google Drive or a Dropbox that you own personally because it was easier to access from your phone
when you're on vacation
or on vacation or when you worked from home, right? Mm-hmm. And now there's corporate IP that is protected by like on your personal stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then another layer is just reputationally. So if you're not offboarding someone thoughtfully with empathy, they're going to go put you on blast on Glassdoor or things like that.
Right.
So every touch point really has a big impact if you just do it right.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about your time at Uber because Uber is such a fun company.
It is. I love Uber.
to talk about too. And I mean, they've had their share of breaches.
They have.
And they're like, they can't catch a break. Like they're just like, they're doing great things and they've just transformed the transportation industry.
Yeah.
And then they're getting breached. And there's, I mean, one case study is always like the MFA fatigue. I think their last breach
MFA
involved.
bombing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like MFA bombing. Like what a great life lesson to learn that. Right. But you know, it's so interesting. So you were running or involved in the insider threat program. So what does that look like? And we don't have to talk about Uber specifically, but I want you to draw on those experiences. Like, what does that look like? Is it for Uber cab drivers? Are they getting mad? Are they going down the wrong street? They driving too long? Like, what is it? Like, what's the insider threat at Uber? Like, walk us through some of that.
It's all I can say is thank goodness it didn't apply to drivers or partners.
Because that was a whole
millions of people.
That was a whole thing too. There's so much going on with like whether the taxi unions and all, like there was so much litigation and all that. It was just a big mess.
Right. Yeah. So one could argue that those partners don't have access to Uber facilities or systems or personnel. Right.
Exactly.
So those were not within the scope of the program. Program was internal for contractors.
For Uber corporate. Right.
Yeah.
Or Uber contractors.
Yeah. But it was a global program.
Right. And so what types of things, like what did you learn from working there? Like what aspects could you draw from without disclosing anything about how Uber operates clearly? But what aspects, you know, what experiences did you glean from that kind of helps you help other organizations?
Well, a lot. I could write a book. I think the first thing was, so I worked at Uber for 6 years and I was hired to stand up their insider threat program. Mm-hmm. When I first got hired, I joined a team that was all over the news, not until after I was hired, called Strategic Services Group, SSG. They were involved with the Uber Waymo thing. They're in the depositions. Like if you look up the documents, they're mentioned a lot. So I was recruited by this team and I was so excited to join. And as we were trying to build up momentum and get that C-suite buy-in for having an insider threat program, total chaos and turmoil. The CEO was fired. Everyone above me left. Like literally I was like left standing like, hello.
Right.
So what I learned there is that while I'm a go-getter, like I want to boil the ocean yesterday kind of thing. What I learned is that when you're building an insider threat program, especially for a large organization, the thing with insider threat or human risk management in general, it touches every single stakeholder, every department that's in your company is going to touch your program. And so building that kind of kumbaya consensus can be really, really challenging, especially in times of turmoil. And so I had to basically take baby steps. So what I did is I focused, where's the most risk? What assets do we want to protect the most? And instead of focusing on corporate, I first stood up the program for their autonomous technologies group. So, ATG, obviously technology with driverless cars, that's impressive. So I pivoted to pitch Eric Meyhofer, who ran that at the time, who I just adore, but basically focused on that. And once I could build out a proof of concept, could then pivot and say, look, everyone, it was successful. It has not impacted you. Right. We can help you, and then move it into corporate.
And did that cycle eventually happen, or was there just
it did
turmoil? And
it did. Good. But I think a lot of people try, like I would have, and I did. You try to just go and company wide, and let's go.
Right.
And sometimes you can't do that. You've got to do the baby steps.
No, especially at a larger company, you kind of have to pick the department in which to make it's almost a pilot program, right? You kind of do it and you execute and you have a case study and then you roll it out to other departments.
Exactly.
So that's a good lesson right there.
Yeah. It's kind of like Survivor too. You don't want to get voted off the island. You want to be in an alliance. So you got to form your alliances and you got to play the game.
Insider threat is a lot like Survivor.
Yeah.
That's good. That's cool. Well, before I let you go, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's this thing called AI. And it's kind of a big thing. No, it's kind of I invented it.
Oh, that's weird.
I created it. Like some people created the internet. So I created it. No, how the intersection of AI and insider threat, I come up with 1,000 examples. Like, what are you seeing in rolling out programs and addressing AI? Is it the AI use? Is it the various databases? What all are you seeing?
It's everything. The thing with AI is it touches everything again.
Right.
You mentioned the keynote speaking. My number one speech this year is focused on AI. 98% of people are booking the AI speech. Mm-hmm. With AI and insider threat, you have to look at the pros and the cons and how AI can be used to not only help your organization, because there are wicked cool tools out there that can do that, but also the threat vectors coming in at the organization, but at the employees themselves. So with AI, I worry about, from the insider threat angle, things like data poisoning, someone who's disgruntled and they get into your network and they, mess things up. They ruin the integrity or the confidentiality or availability of your data. Spoofing, deepfakes. We've all heard the deepfake horror stories, like that poor man who wired $25 million to a deepfake. Yep. All of voice cloning, all of these things are real. And so the thing that I'm really pushing with insider threat is you have to educate your people on what the threats are to them and their families. I will always say, if you build good cyber hygiene at home, don't tell people, don't do this. This is our policy. You can't do this because we tell you. Right. It has to be, we care about you and your families. Here are all the tips and tricks and tools and everything you need to protect yourselves.
Exactly.
When you do
Here's
that
how
at home,
to freeze your credit. Here's how to see if you've been breached. Here's how to protect your kids from sextortion online. Here's how to, if you do that, and it gets back to the whole, I just think it gets back to changing behavior. If you want to change behavior, you can't just talk about policies and things, because that's not landing on the part of the brain that drives behavior, right? You have to drive it to the emotional part. And that is, why are they doing it, right? Exactly. Like, why should they care about the company's cybersecurity? Isn't that IT's problem? No. Yes. Every time you get online, you have a responsibility. So why should you care? It's not just another thing we're asking you to do, but really what it is, if we can help you care more and protect your family and protect yourself and your own FICO score and your whatever they care about, right? Then that digital hygiene, that improved digital hygiene, comes with them everywhere they go.
Exactly. But you have to take human nature into account.
Absolutely.
People are going to want to know what's in it for me. Great. You have a webinar. Shawnee Delaney speaking. Big deal. Who's that?
Right.
If you advertise what's in it for them, they will come. They will listen. But also, I like to remind people too that they've done studies, and human attention span is 1 second less than a goldfish. Less than a goldfish.
I'm sorry. What were you talking?
I know.
I'm sorry.
Who are you? What's your name? Yeah.
Sorry.
If you're doing training and awareness,
right,
please don't do it the old boring way. You have to leverage what's going on in the world and pop culture and make things short and concise and to the point and put the benefits up front.
Yep. I agree with that completely. Let's talk a little bit about, and I think you just mentioned it, but as we wrap up, the best type of security awareness and insider threat awareness training. Is it's something to me that's got to be short, segmented, available everywhere, and kind of job embedded. It's got to be like integrated into the culture.
Yes, it does. You have to have a security culture. When I interview people for these human risk assessments, and I interview CEOs, and I ask the CEO, what are your cultural values? When the answer is,
growth, right? It's always growth. And I'm like, growth for what? Like, right. Money's the result. Like, growth for what purpose? Like, what's
right. You have to be willing to get uncomfortable. You have to be willing to take surveys and take that feedback from your employees. You have to be willing to shift your cultural values. Those should be a living document.
Right.
As your company changes, those values are going to change, right? So taking in that feedback, making sure and to bring back Uber again, what I really loved when Dara came in, the new, well, he's not new anymore, new CEO, second CEO, when he came in, they did a total readjustment of cultural values. That, the old values were like toe stepping was one of them. It was very aggressive. It was very like, we're going to win at all costs. When they changed those, they did a survey and they let people offer suggestions for what they thought the cultural values should be, which I thought was brilliant. Mm-hmm. And they took a bunch of them and they added their own. And then they made it a big marketing and branding campaign. So it wasn't like, hey, read this policy doc, here's our cultural values. It was on Zoom backgrounds. It was on t-shirts. It was in your performance metrics. Tie your performance to these cultural values. And that's how you're going to be rated. That was brilliant. And they really did it right there.
Oh, that's really good. Tying metrics to cultural values. Mm-hmm. That's phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Shawnee Delaney, thank you so much. This was fantastic. So what's on the horizon? Let us know what public speaking, are you going to, there's a lot of sessions going on. Are you going to do some specifically for organizations or associations coming up?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I have any conference. No, I do have a couple conferences coming up, but usually I'm pretty busy September, October. Companies can book me out to do keynotes, webinars, things like this, where I talk to enterprise-wide. Mm-hmm. I tell cool spy stories. I try to get people to understand everything we've just discussed and how it'll benefit them. I've written a book on insider threat. We're in final editing right now, which I'm very excited about.
When's that set to be released?
I don't know. I'm hoping in the next maybe 2-3 months. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I keep adding stuff in.
Yeah.
And then I'm writing a children's book on cybersecurity as well.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, there aren't enough of those.
Well, there's none really that touch on AI and the AI risks. I'll tell you that.
No, well, that's fantastic. When those come out, please consider coming back because
I would love to.
We would love to have you. We would love to dive into that. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, that's great. Well, thank you so much. And we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, that wraps this up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our episode. The next one is coming right up. We appreciate you making this an award-winning podcast and downloading on Apple and Spotify and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for watching.